There is way too much going on in Foxborough right now to treat this like just another normal June. The A.J. Brown deal is already done, but it left some serious tracks behind. A major Christian Gonzalez negotiation, a quiet but real hole at tight end, a careful internal conversation with TreVeyon Henderson, and Brown's first real connection with Drake Maye. Today, we're reading those signals from the inside. No panic, no excuses. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button, because this behind-the-scenes story deserves a closer look. The Gonzalez story does not begin on the field. It begins in that part of the building fans never get to see, where agents study the market, executives measure precedent, and every quiet week turns into something people try to interpret. Christian Gonzalez had his fifth-year option picked up for 2027, so the Patriots still have contractual control for a while. But control is not the same thing as emotional security around your best perimeter defender, and the uncomfortable part is this. After the A.J. Brown trade changed the whole energy, the next major responsibility in Foxborough feels obvious. Gonzalez is not just some complimentary piece. He is the kind of corner who changes a defensive coordinator's entire menu, because he lets you call coverage with more confidence, disguise help, squeeze the field, and protect other areas of the roster. When you have a player like that, the conversation cannot just sit in the hallway forever. The OTA detail turns up the temperature. Gonzalez apparently stayed away from voluntary activities, and the expectation is that he shows up for mandatory minicamp later this month. By itself, that does not have to become drama. Players use the calendar to send messages all the time. The problem comes when that message runs into a long silence from the other side. The fan base is looking at Elliott Wolf and trying to decide if this is calculated patience or dangerous hesitation. Then Ian Rappaport goes on the Pat McAfee show and changes the read a little bit. He said he sees a good chance Gonzalez gets a big deal before the season, even though he does not feel anything is about to happen immediately. To me, that sentence captures the mood better than anything else. There is smoke from optimism, but the clock is still ticking. The door is not closed. The pen is not on the table either. That difference matters because Greg Bedard, speaking in Boston, brought a much more uncomfortable angle, the possibility that the Crafts may not want to hand out a contract that could reset the cornerback market. Between a more confident national read and a more suspicious local read, I understand why Patriots fans pause for a second. But when you look at the track record on information, Rappaport deserves real weight. And when you look at the football, Gonzalez deserves priority. Mike Vrabel did not come here to build a defense that looks good on paper and weak at the foundation. If New England's secondary is viewed as one of the best in the league, Gonzalez is the biggest reason why. So the internal question should not be whether he is worth a massive contract. It should be the real cost of letting this drag into a saga when the team just showed ambition by bringing in A.J. Brown. Paying a star hurts. Losing a pillar hurts a whole lot more. The hole at tight end does not make the same noise as a star contract standoff. But inside an NFL building, that kind of problem turns lights on quickly. Julian Hill suffering a season-ending injury is the kind of news that can feel small if you are only watching headlines, especially after the earthquake named A.J. Brown. But for people building a roster, depth is not a small detail. Depth is what keeps a promising season from turning into patchwork by October. That is what puts Colby Parkinson on the radar. Mo Moten from Bleacher Report suggested Parkinson from the Rams as a name who should be a trade candidate. Not because Los Angeles is announcing some clearance sale, but because their tight end room is crowded. Tyler Higbee got an extension, Max Clare arrived in the second round, Terrence Ferguson looks like someone the Rams want to see take on a bigger role, and that could leave Parkinson or Davis Allen on the edge if the roster keeps 4 tight ends. For the Patriots, that read fits almost too cleanly. Austin Hooper left in free agency. Hill is now out for the year. Eli Rareeden came in the 3rd round out of Notre Dame, with size and usefulness, but also an injury history and a profile that may lean more blocker than steady passing game target. And Drake Maye just got A.J. Brown. When you invest like that in a true number 1 receiver, it makes no sense to leave the middle of the field leaning on hope and improvisation. Parkinson is 27 years old, 6'7", 266 pounds, and he is coming off a season with 43 catches, 408 yards, and 8 touchdowns. That is not just a big body standing on the line. That is red zone presence, a high-point target, a third-down tool, and someone who forces defenses to think twice before selling out to stop Brown outside. And that is where the inside read lives. The Patriots do not need glamour at that position. They need function. The price, of course, decides everything. If the Rams really do have excess at the position, maybe Parkinson does not cost something outrageous. The original piece even brings up names like Kayshon Boutte or Pop Douglas as possible pieces in a deal, and that is where I slow down. Trading a receiver after finally strengthening Drake Maye demands real caution. Can you discuss it? Sure, but New England cannot fix one hole by opening another. Still, the idea makes sense. Mike Vrabel knows a physical roster needs a reliable tight end, and Josh McDaniels knows the value of a big target working inside. After Brown, the next smart move does not have to be spectacular. It can be surgical. Parkinson would be exactly that kind of piece. Less headline, more fit. The TreVeyon Henderson situation is the kind of thing a head coach has to handle before it becomes permanent noise inside the locker room. It is not just about a post, and it is not just about the public reaction. It is about how a team trying to compete manages personal convictions, internal respect, and work focus without letting the season get hijacked by outside noise. Henderson drew criticism after a social media reaction involving Jaden Ivey, the NBA player released by the Chicago Bulls after comments described as anti-LGBTQ+. Henderson shared a Bible verse about being persecuted for righteousness' sake, and the backlash hit hard. Mike Vrabel stepped into it, spoke with him, and addressed the team as well. That kind of move does not show up on a scoreboard, but it tells you a lot about command. The inside read here matters. Henderson said the conversation with Vrabel was great, that the coach respected his beliefs, and that he expressed that to the team. He did not directly apologize for the irritation caused, and he did not go into detail to reopen the debate. He explained that he sees love, faith, grace, and truth through a biblical lens, and said he will continue sharing his faith. Patriots fans can have different opinions on that. That is fine. The team's job now is to make sure the environment stays professional, respectful, and united. Vrabel seems to have chosen authority without making it a show. He listened, talked, addressed the group, and handled it internally. For a new head coach leading an ambitious phase in New England, that matters. Leadership is not only yelling at practice. Sometimes it is stopping a spark before it turns into a fire. On the field, Henderson has a big story to write. Taken at pick 38 out of Ohio State, he played all 21 regular season and playoff games in 2025, started 5, put up 1,241 scrimmage yards, and tied Ramondre Stevenson for the team lead with 10 touchdowns. That is real production, not empty promise. The most interesting part was the self-scouting. Henderson pointed to 2 areas he wants to develop: blocking and running routes out of the backfield, along with catching the ball more consistently. That connects directly to Drake Maye. A running back who protects better and becomes a threat in the passing game changes the geometry of the defense. Patriots fans, tell me this: do you see Henderson as a piece ready to make that year 2 jump? Or do you still need to see more before fully trusting him? To me, the answer starts showing up at minicamp and then in July at training camp. Vrabel has already shown he can handle the human side. Now Henderson has to turn presence, maturity, and talent into an even bigger role in this offense. A.J. Brown has already arrived, but the most important backstage work starts after the headline. Trading for a number 1 receiver is the visible part. What actually decides the season lives in the details. First practice, timing with Drake Maye, route language, coverage adjustments, and trust in the look before the ball leaves the quarterback's hand. Brown went to the Patriots for a 2028 first-round pick and a 2027 fifth-rounder. And honestly, that is the kind of move that changes the temperature around the league. Not only because Brown is a name, because New England spent years hearing that it did not support the quarterback enough, that it lacked aggression, that the offense lived without putting fear into opposing defenses. Now there is a target who forces the coordinator on the other side to redraw the week. The Yahoo Fantasy detail is interesting for that reason. Justin Boone has Brown as WR11 in redraft rankings for 2026. Fantasy is not a playbook, of course, but it works as a perception gauge. The market looks at Brown in New England and still sees high value, even after 2 seasons affected by injuries and frustration in Philadelphia. He is coming off another 1,000-yard season, even in a year considered below his standard. That says plenty about the player's floor. And now comes the part I think should worry rivals the most: the emotional reset. Brown turns 29 later this month, so he is not arriving as some kid to be molded from scratch. He arrives with bruised pride, a new environment, and a young quarterback with the arm to attack every area of the field. That kind of combination can turn into chemistry fast if the Patriots build the offense around what he does best: hard slants, contested catches, intermediate routes, physical work after the catch. We also cannot pretend everything solves itself. Brown has to adapt. Maye has to learn his timing. Josh McDaniels has to avoid the temptation of feeding only the star and forgetting distribution. But the simple fact that Brown is already on the field catching passes from his new quarterback changes the conversation. Before, the Patriots were searching for offensive identity. Now they have a piece that forces identity. That is the thread connecting the whole day. Gonzalez demands franchise-level action. Parkinson would be a support adjustment. Henderson has to grow in the details. Brown represents the public ambition. Behind all of it, Foxborough is trying to stop looking like a project and start functioning like a threat. I look at this whole set of stories and see a Patriots team that can no longer act like it is waiting for permission to be taken seriously. If I am in Foxborough, I pay Gonzalez, look for real help at tight end, protect Henderson's growth, and speed up the connection between Drake Maye and A.J. Brown every single day. That is the path of a franchise trying to become a problem again. I want your read. Are the Patriots building something big, or is one decisive piece still missing? Comment, subscribe to the channel, and stay here with me because this story is only getting started.